Mr. Platsidakis, the theme of our discussion today is how Greek shipping can thrive in a new market. Other countries, especially in Asia, often have government subsidies to help ship owners in difficult times. Do you feel the Greek industry is perhaps at a disadvantage because it does not have the benefit of this?
Thank you, Yuri. To the contrary, I think this is the big advantage of Greek shipping. We don't rely upon any subsidies, any preferential cargoes, any financial assistance from either the government or other entities. My personal belief is that the success story of Greek shipping is based on the fact that we act alone. We don't have anybody else to rely upon if we encounter a problem. And by doing so and being there, we have to perform the best and do our best in order to survive and succeed. So overall, I think it's a great advantage that we stand on our own.
But I remember a story you once told me about Neil Kinnock, the former UK opposition leader and then EU commissioner after that, who wrote European regulations allowing crew members to claim travel expenses and these being offered to Greek sailors, and you turned down the offer when it was made to you. Do you ever regret this decision?
I had the personal experience of meeting a new Minister of Marine at the time, and he did say that based on the European maritime policy, which was written by Kinnock at the time, that the state could subsidize the traveling expenses of our crew. The answer was very clear. No, thank you very much, we're not going to take it. He was hugely surprised, and he asked me why. And my reply was twofold. First of all, the structure of the cost of traveling is so complicated that certainly the state will be at the loss at the end of the day. But more importantly, if the state did have sufficient funds to spare, they could invest it on maritime education, and by return, we will be getting better quality seamen. So that was the end of the story. So in other words, we do not want subsidies. We don't want financial assistance. We are partners with our banks, and that's it. And I think the model has worked well in the past, and it will certainly work well in the future. At the same token, we regret hugely that a lot of taxpayers' money is wasted by certain countries simply to support their maritime sector. I think it's a loss for the taxpayers, and it's a lost game. Thank you.
But at the same time, Mr. Yannis, if you don't mind me saying, there is a perception that Greek ship owners pay less taxes than other industries and have an inbuilt advantage because of this. So they're in effect being subsidized by the government. How much truth is there to this perception?
I think this perception is hugely wrong. It's a very populistic approach by certain people, not only in Greece, but certainly in other countries as well and in Europe, because it's an easy statement. It's not founded by any numbers. Just to give you an example, I was making a very rough calculation some time ago, and I came up with the conclusion that the German flag Capesize vessel was paying 3.5 or 4 times more tax. The Greek flag Capesize vessel was paying 3.5 to 4% more tax than a German one. And as you all know very well, because of the financial problems of our country, some 4 years ago, we agreed with the state to pay double tax, not only for the double tax in order to support the finances of the state. On top of that, we actually came to offer to the state that we pay taxes, tonnage tax, for all vessels managed out of Greece, irrespective of whether they fly the national flag or not. So certainly I drop this statement. We do pay tax.
But isn't the system of tonnage tax, the amounts coming in, aren't they quite marginal compared to a potential tax on profits of the industry, which isn't paid?
Tonnage tax was actually invented in this country many decades ago because the taxman came to the conclusion that it was almost impossible to try and find the taxable, if any, income of ships trading between, let's say, the US Gulf and the Far East. That's why the taxman decided, and they came up with the tonnage tax. And mind you, over the years, most countries, with some variations, have adopted the tonnage tax system. Tonnage tax is paid irrespective of the profitability or the losses incurred by the ship. So certainly it's not unfair. Now, if we want to come with populistic approaches and say, who has the money, let's grab it and spend it, certainly that's the wrong way, because the hundreds of vessels which are presently under construction by Greek ship owners in the shipyards are financed by the profits, whenever they come, of the existing vessels. And it's not the objective of grabbing the money. New ships that are coming into the Greek ownership, they create wealth because we employ seamen, we employ shore-based personnel, we pay them, and this comes back into the country. The side benefits of the state from shipping is huge. And it's not the tonnage tax that makes the difference. It's the creation of additional wealth.
And are you happy with the availability of finance for the industry? Many banks which used to offer shipping finance have wound down the units which specialize in this area. How much more difficult is it for shipping owners to secure finance today than perhaps 15 or 20 years previously?
Certainly, the finance market has changed over time. The banks have encountered severe problems, and so they have readdressed their lending policies. Shipping market certainly did not help in this respect. So where we stand today is that we see less banks active in the market, and most of them actually address themselves to less companies than what they used to do in the past. So I would say, of course, it's different to differentiate because it depends on the company. But I would say that certainly there is capacity missing for the medium-sized, small-sized companies. But it seems to me that Greek shipping is doing well because it's thriving, it's doing well. So somehow they have managed to find their ways. Either because they have sufficient liquidity or because they can address themselves to other banks that they are willing to support the industry. So as a conclusion, I would say, yes, certainly there's a shortage, but nevertheless, it seems to me that it is addressed.
Isn't it a case that some of the larger players and some Greek commentators would include you amongst these players? You're employing former bankers from Goldman Sachs to organize your finances and balance sheets in an attractive way for you so that banks such as ING, Credit Suisse, BNP Paribas, they're all queuing up to give you loans at, and other larger companies, LIBOR plus 1%. The finance is abundantly available to the masters of the universe. But as you say, the smaller ship owners are now squeezed out. They have to learn a new language, a new system, how to deal with funds, credit funds, private equity, leasing companies. It's a huge task for those who have been squeezed out of the system.
Certainly, over time, the expertise required by the market developments necessitates the upgrading of the employees of the shore-based companies. I would differentiate between the public companies and the private companies. There is need to employ more sophisticated people, but at the end of the day, Greek shipping, as an overall statement, is a relationship industry. So I think the typical Greek ship owner is trying to establish a long-term relationship with the banks. So it's not only an investment attitude. It's an ongoing relationship. So I wouldn't say that we have to go to the extremes and try to play the game of the markets. We have to put value on an ongoing relationship, because that makes the difference, I think, in Greek shipping.
And Dr. Stopford, in his introductory remarks, talked about the center of gravity moving away from the Atlantic to the Far East. Are Greek ship owners now looking increasingly to China and the Far East, to the leasing firms there for finance?
Certainly, leasing has become popular over the recent, I would say, 2-3 years, and it comes mostly from Chinese leasing companies. I would say that it's an additional source of liquidity. People have to analyze the system and see whether it can suit them for their needs. It's not as simple as a pure commercial loan from a traditional shipping bank, but certainly they're mostly welcome to come along.
Do we have any questions from the audience for Mr. Platsidakis? It's a very good opportunity to direct any queries to one of the leading lights of the shipping industry. If not, there'll be plenty more opportunities later on. I mean, geographically, Mr. Yannis, Greece appears to be right in the middle of China's One Belt, One Road geographical initiative to economically and politically influence world trade and international relations. Is there a fear that with the finance now coming from China and ships being built exclusively in the Far East, that the industry will very much become Chinese controlled and not really autonomous anymore?
No, certainly not. Yes, it's a fact that we build our ships in the Far East, and I have to remind the audience that we have been the principal supporters of the enhancement of Japanese shipbuilding in the 60s and the 70s. Thereafter, we supported hugely the Korean and eventually the Chinese shipbuilding industry. So we are there. You see, the beauty, I think, of Greek shipping is that it's a very flexible society. It's a very flexible industry. And Greek shipping has been able to come to terms with changing market conditions. If it is Japan or China or Korea, the competitive nations to build a ship, we are there. If the trade is in the Far East, we are there. Don't forget that we don't depend on our country for the provision, for providing cargoes. We are tramp operators, so we operate worldwide. And as we stand today, Greek shipping controls, as you all know, 22% of the dry bulk fleet, 25% of the tanker fleet. We have the third largest container fleet and the fourth largest LNG fleet. So we are everywhere, and it's a matter of pride that we have managed actually to transport, let's say, 25% of the imports of China in terms of crude oil and 22% of cargoes.
And bearing in mind that Greek shipping was born out of war and conflict, and that families brought old vessels from the US Navy after the Second World War, how do you rate the period we're going through today in terms of size, numbers of staff employed, and relative success compared to other periods in Greece's history?
Well, Greek shipping has gone through various phases in the past. As a matter of history, I would say that there is evidence of maritime trade in the Aegean Sea dating back some 10,000 years ago. And this is based on a very rare mineral that is produced in the island of Milos, and it was found in Argolida in the Peloponnese. It was determined that that happened, the transportation of the mineral happened some 10,000 years ago. So it means that it's a very old industry in the region. So we have gone through various phases. You referred to the end of the Second War. Yes, the Second War, Greek shipping suffered the most in terms of losses of vessels and seamen as compared to the population in the Allied effort. And we started again by buying the 100 Liberty ships from the laid-up American fleet. And this fleet today numbers more than 4,000 vessels. So we have come to terms with the various phases of shipping. I'm very positive and very confident that the future is good. Of course, we have to address the manning problem. In the past, we relied a lot on Greek seamen to crew our vessels. This is changing. Hopefully, we will address the problem. But overall, the future looks good. And it looks good because we stand on our own, and by necessity, we have to do our best in order to survive. That makes the difference between Greek shipping and other shippings.
Well, that's a very optimistic message from Mr. Platsidakis. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for one of the leading lights of the industry here in Athens.